Welcome back, everyone. I am John, and you're watching Ion Radio Backseat Admiral. I'm going to wait until chat can catch up with me, because there's a bit of a delay to make sure my mic is working. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you're in chat, go ahead and comment if you can hear me on my mic. And then I'll get going. So today is November 1st, 2021, and we'll be taking a look at Season 2, Episode 7. And I won't get into spoilers just yet, but there's a lot to talk about in this episode. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. So we do have sound. Perfect. Okay, so a lot has happened this last week for me. I have officially moved all of my belongings in. I have my basement nice and set up. So Ken and I are starting to record again into Season 3 and Season 4. We decided to just pretty much plan them all at the same time. And we're both super excited to be getting back into the swing of things. If you're trying to do things consistently, I highly recommend not moving. It is super, super stressful and takes a lot of time. I'm still on all of my off time, I'm doing chores. My wife's like, today's this day. So today was, for me, I installed a new sink faucet, which I'm not a plumber. I'm in the medical field. I don't really do cleaning and plumbing or handiwork. So it's all very, very experimental for me. And I hung things, so those right here, I hung those today. So we went around the house and I hung up pictures and frames and everything. So it was a lot of fun. But that's not why you guys are here. You're here to talk about Armada, so we're going to get right into it. Let's flip on over to what today is. So here we go. November 1st, 2021, episode 2.75. It might echo. It's loud. Here, let me open the door. Let me see if that changes anything. Is that a little bit better? Hopefully it is. It might just be the sound for the room. Still trying to figure out the sound over here. So today, in this fleet, I have this Kraken list that is, for me, very experimental. And then it's a Ramadi list that I believe our Patreon member, Rovechkin, made, and Ken flew. So if you haven't watched the episode, you should go watch the episode. I'm going to spoil things real big in about 10 seconds. So you've been warned. Okay, so as you already know, Ken wins this game. And so this is the first time in Season 1-2 that Ken has won. So congrats over to Ken. It was a really, really close game. And it gives me an interesting opportunity on the Backseat Admiral, because usually I'm tweaking a list and then talking about basically what happened. But this time, I get to talk about how I think I could have won the game by changing how I played. And that's super exciting because you actually learn a lot from losing a game compared to winning a game. Because winning a game, you're like, well, everything kind of went fine. Here's a few things that I could improve on. But when you lose a game, there are lots of things you can improve on. And you can be more critical of the decisions that you had in your mind. And then we can talk about how they would theoretically play out over the course of the game. So a lot of it comes down to, again, it's just spoiler. This isn't a very good list that I flew. I wanted to try something different than what I had been doing. And it just didn't work out as I expected. So let's dive into my list build. I'll explain what I had and then what I would probably have to change to make that better. So here is my list. It's a Kraken list. It looks very much so like a first release of the Clone Wars list, because that's pretty much what it is. We have Kraken, who's sitting on a munificent comms frigate. Kraken, we haven't covered in Backseat because I haven't really used him that much. But what he does is once per activation, while a friendly ship is attacking a ship, if another friendly ship is at close medium range of the defender, the attacker may change one dice to a face with any one icon and no other icons. So basically, you can't change it to a black double hit or a red double hit. But what's really, really interesting about that is if you need a crit, you can change it to a crit. And if you need an accuracy, you can change it to an accuracy. And then if you just want to blank, I guess you can just switch over to a hit. But honestly, you're going to be switching everything either to a crit or an accuracy. Those are the two things that you would be changing a dice to. Or if you have black dice, I guess just a hit. So the idea here is to try to pull off crit effects and then just be able to make blank dice that don't like you into something. But you only get to do that once per activation, so I guess you could do it on a salvo, which I didn't think about until right now, because that's once per activation, which includes the other person's activation. And then you need a friendly ship at close to medium range. And that's really what got me most of this game, is that I wasn't technically in range that I needed to be. The rest of the build is reserved hangar deck because, surprise, Separatists have squadrons that have swarm, so this is usually just a good include if you don't know what to do, because 3 points to bring back a squadron, to use it again even if it's reduced health, is still very, very good. And then this is where I went really experimental with the list. So I have ion cannon batteries. There are a bunch of ion cards that I have either never played or I never see play. And I think ion cannon batteries is one of those cards that it can be used specifically against the newer fleets, because like the Republic, they really liked playing token shenanigans. And if you can just wipe a token off, you could mess up their entire thing. Like if I'm shooting at a vendor that has a spat and I can wipe out your concentrate fire token before the end of the turn, you're not going to be able to use it again. And then you won't be using it again, and then hopefully you try to get another token. Well, I could wipe that token out too, so you may only ever get one spat attack off. Or I use it if you don't have any tokens, and the second part of that is you lose a shield. So that's not bad. It is 5 points, which also isn't bad for an upgrade that has a big effect. But it has to use blue dice. And as you can see right here, there is not a lot of blue dice on the Munificent. You have 2 out the front. That's it. So it's not very useful for the ship, but it could be. So let's figure out, how could we get more blue dice out so that we could crack in and just change it to a crit, a blue crit, if we don't roll into it. And then we can use ion cannons to eliminate tokens and eliminate shields. Well, my answer to that was quad battery turrets. And quad battery turrets are, while attacking a ship with a higher speed than yours, you may add 1 blue die to your attack pool. Cool. Well, the Munificents love going slow because they're super slow ships. They only go 1 or 2. So more than likely, most ships are cruising around at speed 2. And you just sit at speed 1. You're still pretty maneuverable. You're actually one of the best maneuver charts for a speed 2 ship. Like, the only thing better, I think, is a Raider. Raiders have 2 and 2. So you're super maneuverable going speed 2. So if they're faster ships going speed 3 and 4 trying to get to you, you get extra dice. And if they're speed 2 ships, you go speed 1 and you're like, I'm a Munificent, I don't really care. So then you can throw the blue dice at longer ranges. And just, in general, add them into your side. And then you can concentrate fire and add another one. So you can then take your side, which is 3 reds, add a blue, add an additional blue, and then with Kraken, change it over to a crit, and then trigger ion cannon batteries. And then you can shoot out your front, which is going to be 2 reds, 2 blues, add in a blue, 3 blues, and then change one of them over to a crit, and then trigger it twice. It's one of the few crit cards that you can actually do twice. Most of them are exhaust now, but it's weak enough that no one uses it, so it didn't get a pass in 1.5 point changes. So that's kind of the idea that I had with Kraken, mainly because I've never played with this card before, and I thought he would be a decent admiral to attempt to pull it off. So the next ship in this line is just another munificent comms frigate with the exact same loadouts except the commander. So then I had another chance to do it. So theoretically, I could strip 4 shields or 4 tokens off of a ship if I was able to double arc it with both these ships at the same time. And that's what I built this whole list around, is this. That's the centerpiece of the list. And then to support it, because, you know, points start becoming crunchy really fast with any fleets, I have 2 hard cells and I have CommsNet on them. So the reason why I have CommsNet on them is to pass tokens to my 2 munificents. It is there to, what's it called? Just pass tokens, mainly so I can have like a nav or maybe an engineering, because most of the time I want to try to either do a Confire to add in those extra blues, but honestly it just gives me flexibility. Like, what else are they going to do? And then we go into the squadrons, and this is actually where I deviated from my plan the most, because if you've been paying attention to this, I basically talk about how I'm like tri-fighters, tri-fighter aces, and tri-fighters. That's all I would use. I would bring tri-fighter aces and then load out the rest with tri-fighters. And I chose intentionally not to do that, and it was very detrimental to me. So let's look at it. General Grievous. I haven't run him since we first got the clones, so I wanted to run him again. I figured he might be a little bit tanky, and he might be really good at taking out generic fighters. It wasn't the case, because Ken was rolling super, super hot, and I don't think I used a single brace, and he died, I believe, in 2 attacks with 1 counter, which is really, really fast. It's just, he was gone. Then I had 2 Belbaba 22 fighters, and again, I thought I could use screen to keep them alive a little bit longer, and that's why I brought Vulture droids, so then I could have 2 Vulture droids, you know, kind of like flying in formation with each of them, and then I would be able to reroll 2 dice and try to keep them alive. Well, that didn't happen either. And then I had 2 tri-fighters because I had the points, and then my idea is with reserved hangar, I would just bring back the 2 tri-fighters, because then I'd get the most out of my points. And I got those 2 back, it's just they still died immediately. And then I had 4 vultures. So honestly, if I were to have brought the other fighter shenanigans list, let me pull this up real fast. I should usually do this beforehand, and it just popped in my head now. So let's find out how much this grouping cost. So this was 106 points of fighters here. So if I were to bring my standard, just take the 2 tri-fighter aces and then fill with tri-fighters. For 102 points, I could bring Flak, Dis, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I could bring 6 I could bring 6 tri-fighters and the 2 tri-fighter aces to this, and I would have counter on every single one of them, and I could bring every single one of them with reserve hangar, and then have 8 activations. So I would be at the same amount of deployments, except Grievous, so I would be, you know, because that's really not one, because I have to deploy him last anyway, because it's an odd number. But the same thing with 6 tri-fighters. And I honestly think, just because I wanted to try something new, the smarter bet would have been to do that. And it is what it is, because then each of my attacks would have gotten counter. And then I would have been doing some chip damage into it. I would have had a bid. I would have gained 4 points back and maybe put an upgrade of some kind on a different ship. It is what it is. But I intentionally chose to not run that and run something different instead, just for fun. And the fighters just sat there and got eaten. So that is my fleet build. So now let's look at what I paired that with objectives, because I was second player. And these are the objectives that I chose. So the first one was Most Wanted, which is good. I have a hard sell. I'll just slap that on there and just be like, oh, come and get me. I'm going to fly away. And what it is while attacking an objective ship, the attacker may add 1 die of any color that is already in the attack pool to its attack pool. So that's really good when you're trying to trigger the ion battery cannon or ion cannon batteries. And it just allows me to throw more blue dice in for free if I'm attacking the one ship that I really want to attack. So you probably don't, you see my build and you're like, oh, he's trying to do blue dice shenanigans. I'm not going to choose that. Moving on. Contested outpost will allow me to place the outpost, and then I can move my munificence like this, so I can get nice double arcs right down the middle. Or you have to fly into their side, and they have huge sides, so you're not going to avoid it. And I can just sit at really low speeds, or even speed 0, right there on the objective. And then my hard cells can come in to support me from behind, and then collect it. So munificence will collect it turn 1, 2, 3, 4-ish, and then the hard cells come in behind that and collect it on turn 5 and 6 for 120 points while I'm going slow so that I can trigger my abilities. And then the last one is kind of in a mixed spot because I don't move fast, and the navigation objectives a lot of times will be like, oh, we're going to have to collect these many tokens or things like that. And that doesn't really play well into me. It doesn't really give me points. So I chose an objective that I don't usually play a lot. I actually like this objective a lot. Volatile deposits. And this allows me to get another crit effect. And as second player, I can trigger it with any dice. And the other player has to do it on blue dice, which means they have to be in blue range. So that's one of the reasons why I bought it, because if they came into blue range, then I should be in blue range for my blue dice out my front, and then I can hopefully be at slower range because they have to move across the table to engage me to do it. It also means that I can sit behind my two, and hopefully they can't get near them because I would protect it. And I can gain 15 points up on them every single round until the game's over, which is what you exactly saw in this. Ken chose volatile deposits and then kind of just sprinted across the board to try to get at me, which is kind of what I wanted. So it's kind of just there to pull the opponent in, and if they don't know what they're doing with it and they leave their asteroid and I'm just sitting on mine the entire game, I just win. It's really just it makes you engage me card or I win. So that is the reason why I have it. So now let's look over at the fleet that Ken flew. It was submitted to us by Rovechin, and I'm going to still critique it, so this isn't to hurt anyone's feelings. To me, I look at this list and I think, oh, this is a Sloan list. But it's actually a General Ramadi list. And he's cheap, so he might work just fine with it. Most of the time, I'm not seeing an Imperial 2 class Star Destroyer getting obstructed when it's your primary ship. You don't want to really put it near obstacles. As you can see, I almost kill my own ships on obstacles all the time. It has Intel Officer, which is good for it. I think it would be better if that was a Simoon, though. Intel I see with Simoon, or I play with Simoons more than Imperial 2. I like having token generating Imperial officers on my Imperial Star Destroyers now because you need so many different tokens all the time. Then you have gunnery teams, which is just glued onto it, but that's why I need the token generator, because you need to have that con fire every single turn, so then you're maximizing your firepower out. It has a reserve hangar deck, which works well with the Imperial. Same reason it worked well in my fleet. You just bring something back for free, as if it didn't even die. Link turbo laser towers. Or is this a Simoon? Sorry, this is a Simoon. Scratch all of that. This is a Simoon. It is not an Imperial 2. Ken made a mistake when we were making this card. Slide. I'm like, because you can't have 2 turbo lasers on this. But this is also one of the standard things that I have. So take all that back. This is a Simoon. This is how I would build it. So it has Link turbo laser towers, and it has spinal armaments to add the additional red dice, and then you get to re-roll the red dice. And then Devastator, which is once per round while attacking from your front hull zone, You may add 1 blue dice to your attack pool for each of the discarded defense tokens. It's 10 points. It's a lot of points. I prefer Sloan. That's me. Yeah, thanks, Ken. Ken just posted. Yes, it is a Simon one. But I like keeping my tokens. I don't like really discarding them. But if you don't have a defensive retrofit, more than likely you will be discarding them more frequently, so this might help. And it ended up being what helped Ken kill me. If he didn't have it, he wouldn't have killed me. So there's there. So it all worked its way out just fine. The next is Instructor Goran with his wall-friendly non-heavy squadron is at distance 1 to 2. It is counter 1 or increases its counter value by 1. So he is 7 points for that. And you're only starting to see use out of him because of the change in the way Intel worked. So the way Intel used to work in version 1 of Armada is it gave all enemy squadrons at distance 1 heavy. And because if you have a keyword, you have a keyword. So all you would have to do is fly like Jan Ors or a Hawk up to an Imperial player, give them all heavy, and now this card is useless. So now it's not completely useless, it's just almost useless. Imperials are an Alpha Strike squadron list. They don't want to be on the defense. As you saw, Ken used it as an Alpha Strike. My fleet also wanted to be an Alpha Strike. And whoever gets the Alpha Strike wins the squadron battle. Period. You have to have a lot of shenanigans planned to come back from a full-on Alpha Strike list with a full-on Alpha Strike list, because it just dies. They're just little glass cannons. You don't want to be hit near your ship. So you also don't want your Quasar near enough their fighters that they're going to be getting a jump on you. So I wouldn't build my Quasar like this. I would give it something to control my dials or a way to give me tokens to increase my other things. Which also brings up to why I don't run Stronghold. I'll run Pursuant, and then I'll run that other one. I always forget the name of it. The one that you just get a squadron dial if you have a different dial, because I find that really useful to throw near the end of the game. It would be like, hey, I want to nav and drop or speed up to keep my Quasar alive. Flight controllers. I love flight controllers. I've been saying it for weeks now. I barely build a list now if I'm really, really fighter heavy without flight controllers, because getting that extra punch specifically on the Alpha Strike is huge. Boosted comms, great on a Quasar. It doesn't want to be anywhere near combat, and being able to activate at distance 1 to 5 into the squadron ball to like just skirt the edge and activate them ahead of you. Great. Reserved hangar, same as before. Get a fighter back for free. It's great. And then the last ship is a Gazanti. It is CommsNet. It is reserved hangar deck, so CommsNet because it's just going to pass tokens to the ISD because it has no token control whatsoever. Reserved hangar deck, so you can bring another squadron back, and Vector. Vector says that the speed of each squadron without heavy you activate is increased by 1 to a maximum of 5 until the end of the round. So for 2 points, I would probably just take the 2-point bid. Because most of the Imperial squadrons, and when we get to the squadron in a second, are either speed 4 or speed 5 already. So that increase really doesn't help you because you want to Alpha Strike with your Quasar and not necessarily with your other fighters. But this might just help you position slightly. But a lot of times with Imperial fighters, you're alphaing in, and that's where they're going to live for the rest of the battle as you kill off the squadrons and fight where their ships are, not pull them back to you. So let's look at the squadrons. You have Sienna Ray, who's good. She's always obstructed. You have Mark Steele. He should be in pretty much every Imperial list. And Hal Runner to increase swarm. Then you have 2 TIE Phantom squadrons, and you have 3 TIE Interceptors. So each of the Interceptors, which have swarm, have their own reserve hangar deck. So you can just bring all of the TIE Interceptors back once. TIE Phantoms, people love or hate them. I hate them because they're double red dice non-bomber. It also has Cloak, which allows you to either at the end of the round move an extra 1 forward, or be able to try to withdraw out of combat and away from the enemy engagement. So you got some play and give with that. But as a whole, if you look, speed 5, speed 5, speed 4, speed 4, speed 4, and then speed 5. This is already a very, very fast group. Where I would see it more is if you had squadrons that were speed 3, which the Empire really doesn't have a lot, but you could use it, and you could make with Vector. This is what I'm talking about. You could take Vector and like Morna Key, or Vector and Colonel Jendon, and you can move them then 4, which is actually pretty huge. But they're not in this list, and I would probably just increase bid. I always just like, it could just be a bid. Or change another thing into something else with it. But most of the initial cards are either already expensive or the slots filled, so you would probably just increase bid. So that's it for those builds. We have already talked about objectives, and we talked about the basic build fleets, and we talked about what I would change in my build, because really the whole build's just to play with the ion cannon. So what would be better is if I just had linked turbo laser towers on it, but then that's not what the list is supposed to be trialing out. So where I would change it is I would go back to my super original, really boring, let's bring the tri-aces and the tri-fighters as all my fighters and just hang out with that. So I'm going to go to comments now. So if you have a question or a comment about the builds, about the way they play, anything like that, throw it in the comments. I'm going to read through them, and then we're going to break down the game itself and see where I think that I could have improved. Okay, so hey everyone, I hope you guys are all doing fine. A bunch of people saying hello, and they can hear my mic. I actually really like the Kraken with the shield draining crit effect and quad batteries. I can work really well if you get it to work, but if the formation is off, it can go down pretty quick. Yes. Yes, I 100% agree with that statement, and that's pretty much what I felt in this. You'll see when I deploy, I had a plan, and then it just kind of slowly fell apart consistently throughout all of it. But I would agree with that. It was a fun, like, trying to get those crits off. It just, you lose some control with not having LTT. Irish says, ion battery seems counterintuitive with volatile deposits. So it does, but the reason why I have it there is it just gives you another option. And with Kraken, I can guarantee, theoretically, to get a crit if I have a ship close. So I could roll in, I could see what I have, and if I somehow roll like 2 crits, I could then change another one to a crit, and then they're eating 2 damage instead of the 1 shield damage, which might be better, or knock out a token that I specifically need. So if I need to knock out a token, like for sure, then I use that card, which 5 points. And then on the next attack, if I get it off again, then I can choose to do it. Or I use volatile deposits, and I just add that damage to everything. So it just gives me options, and it also forces them, if they're going to use it, they need to be in blue range of me, so that means that they have to come across the table toward me to use it. And I can theoretically use it at long range because I'm using quad batteries to add in a blue dice. Well, actually, I could just do it with crits in general, and I'm just red dice, so I can do it at longer ranges than they can. They have to move across to me, and if they don't choose to engage me, I will get 15 points up on them every single round if we're both holding our appropriate asteroids. So that's the reason why I took it, pretty much. So it does seem a little bit counterintuitive, but it had a strategy for it in my mind. Ken talking about Simoons, and then if you had Dengar and Instructor Goran, would a fighter only gain counter 1, or would it be boosted and they all get counter 2? So the fun thing about Armada with the 1.5 change is they made it very, very clear what can be boosted and what can't be boosted. If you see something, if you look in the rulebook, the rules reference under like abilities and squadron abilities in specifically, they will be listed as like counter X or just the standard ability. And what that means is anything that is a name X, that's a value. Those values can be increased indefinitely up or down. Technically, I guess nothing brings things down. But the other abilities cannot. So, for example, let me pull it up. Actually, I think I have it in a file. Give me a second while I find this, because then I can just specifically show you. Because I've actually talked about this with someone. I think it was on Discord. That was a while ago. I know me searching through all my files is probably super, super exciting for people to watch. But if you just bear with me, I will find it. It's not that folder. 2020, yep. Okay, here it is. And we're gonna scroll way down. And there will be a whole list of things. Hopefully I just didn't cruise past it. Here it is. So squadron. So as you can see here, adept is X. Ion battery, AI battery, and AI anti-squadron are X. Assault is not. So assault, you just get what you get. Bomber is just what it gets. Cloak is just what it gets. Counter is X. So that means it can be increased. Dodge is X. Escort is just escort. And specifically, this is the one I think that matters the most, is that grit. Grit is just plain. You can't stack grit. So if you have a squadron that already has grit, oh, thanks, Ken, I see you posted it for me. If you have a squadron that has grit on it already, so I think Merrick Steele has it, he has grit. So that means if he's engaged with only one squadron, he can move away. But if you move like a jump master, well, it would be a jump master, or anything that gives grit to another squadron now, with intel, because intel has been changed to, while a friendly squadron is at distance 1 of you, it has grit. It's not increased grit. So you can't move away from 2 squadrons. You only can move away from 1, period. Grit is an on or off effect. While counter is a numbered effect, because it's counter X. So specifically with this question, if you have Dengar and Instructor Gorin, would a fighter only gain counter 1, or would it be boosted and they all get counter 2? So whatever the base counter is, boosted by Gorin, so a TIE Interceptor 2, boosted by Gorin to 3, boosted by Dengar to 4, and then you can also boost it because it's technically an attack with Howl Runner up to 5. So you can just keep stacking counter up, which is pretty awesome. And then you can swarm it too. But if you look here at swarm, here, swarm. Swarm is just an on or off effect. You can't stack more swarm. Strategic is what it is. Snipe is an X, so you can increase snipe. And screen is built in with a limit of up to 3. So you can't have screen 4 because that doesn't exist. You can have screen, and then you can gain dodge 1 for each squadron up to squadron 3. So if you go up to dodge, dodge is an X effect, which can go up. So hopefully that answers your question, and then your question's easy to answer, but this is why that answer is the way it is, because they've made it in the rules to be exactly that. Let me exit out of that now. Okay, and I think we are caught up with our questions now, so I'm going to exit out a couple of these, and then we're going to get into deployment. I'll talk about my strategy, and right off the bat, I can show you exactly what I needed to do, I think, to win this game. So here's my deployment. And I'm zooming in because I have a lot of stuff really, really close together. So with volatile deposits, you want to be close to the asteroids because whoever controls the most command near an asteroid is who gets to control it. And it's worth 15 points at the end of the game for each token that you can get. So each round there's a possibility of 3 tokens that are being handed out. Because you're second player, you get to place an obstacle first, so it better be an asteroid. If you're playing this, whatever you do, grab an asteroid first. First is an asteroid, your opponent then will take an asteroid, and then you get to place the second asteroid. That's the way it works. If you grab anything but the asteroid, then they grab 2 asteroids, and then you have to chase them down, and you're playing the asteroids as if they did it and they're first players, so they're going to just win. And it's not a fun experience, so don't do that. So I placed this one, and under all these fighters, there's another one. So I can just sit in the middle of it and be like, hey, I'm going to sit here and gain 2 tokens per turn, 30 points every single turn until you come and take me off of it. Then I place this dust field in front of it, so you can't shoot through the dust field. So I'm safe unless you come in through the side. You could come in through either side, but you're probably not going to. Ken had already put in his asteroid down here, so I knew he was going to deploy at least something down around there. So I can then base my fleet, so I drop this. Clearly I'm going to go there. All my fighters to see where the other player puts their ships, and then I can point all my ships in that direction to defend that. I decided to make this conga line here of my munificence, and this is where the mistake is. And we'll see it play out throughout the course of the game. I've been making this mistake a lot during the last 2 seasons, and I've mentioned it, that I treat my hard cells as very, very fragile, like Gazanti type, just support ships, and they're not. And I need to get that out of my head. So I think this is the game that has really made me decide that they're not just these really fragile support ships, and I have to use them. Because if you see this ship, it is pointed toward this edge of the table, and the idea was to like fly it as a circle around just in case this ship gets shot. The problem is that I have only 4 activations, and that eats up about 60 plus points of my fleet. I will find out exactly how much it is in just a second. So it eats up 49 points of my fleet. 49 points of my fleet that just doesn't do anything for the entire game. It's an activation, sure, but I didn't get to use it, and I needed to. And when we compare where I was in the game to how much damage Ken's ships have, if it was pointed the other way, I would have tabled Ken and won. Pretty positive on that, because most of his ships needed 1 damage to kill at the end of a round. So I ate free Simoon front shots at close range on ships that shouldn't have had that coming to them. If I was able to get 1 more attack off, would it have been in range? 100% it would have been in range. But I put it the wrong direction. And I think that would be the biggest thing to change for this. Okay, so Ken's deployment, he has his big Simoon right here. His fighters, his Quasar. Quasar, good spot. Like I've always said, skirt the edge. Use your boosted comms to throw your fighters in. And he does that very well. So this is going to move along this path, and the fighters are going to jump probably here, and then jump into the mix right here, and get the alpha on me. He's first player, so he can actually do that. This transport moves up, and then it just stops, and then the Simoon comes crashing in. Even though he's Ramadi, I've put obstacles in the way, because if he lands on him, that's good for me. And if he's shooting at this ship, because it's hiding behind these anyway, if he has line of sight to me, it's going to be obstructed. So I don't care if there's another obstruction in the way. Okay, turn 1. At the end of turn 1, I drop to speed 0 because I'm collecting tokens. It's going to take him, because I'm bunched up completely in my deployment zone, at least 2 turns-ish to get to me. And that means I go up then by 30 points. Every turn that I can delay combat against this Star Destroyer is a good turn for me, because I'm far more fragile than it is. So I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to collect points. I'm going to start moving the turn that I think is right before he's going to be able to shoot at me. And again, I have quad battery turrets, so if he moves into me, he has to be moving faster to try to come across the board to get me, which means that I get to use my dice, and I have this obstacle here kind of thrown out here that I can then trigger that off of as he passes it. That's kind of the idea. I move my fighters into this screening position so we can't just immediately start bombing into my ship that is sitting at speed 0, because that's you don't want to be facing steel when it's just like 2 free damage, and then I'm going to do it again every single turn. Like, that's not what you want. So you can see I start moving my ships because this becomes danger, and the fighters have now come into this fray. We are still at, I believe, almost longish range. So these ships are still safe because they're out of range, so I left them out of range. Because of gunnery teams, like, if I could just make you not shoot me as much, that's great. Ken's Alpha Strike comes in, and it has already wiped out 3 of my fighters. Like, 3 of the vultures, gone. No counter, no nothing. I didn't get anything against it. They're just gone, and he's already injured a bunch of my other fighters. So I'm already hurting. I'm already behind the fighter game. And then he gets to do it again. The next turn, my ships are moving, and Grievous is dead. I have a Belba dead. All my vultures are dead. One of my guys has already been used by reserve hangar. And as you can see here now, I have him in these nice single arc, but you know, I'm also shooting at the Quasar now at medium range. And this guy is shooting, and he's at double arcing at whatever range it is. But when he's shooting me, I'm not close to the obstacles, so he can't trigger that if he's attacking my 2 combat ships. This ship's still sitting here collecting points at speed 0 because it's technically out of range. And now see this little ship, the little ship that should have been pointing the other direction, could have been here to move into combat, and then it would have cleaned up my kills. Oh, it could have cleaned up my kills. I really wish it was moving in, because all I needed really on one of the turns was 1 damage to kill the Star Destroyer. I think it's this turn. I'll pull up the damage in a second. Also, if Ken, he attacked me, this ship right here, and I chose not to salvo because it was intel, thinking I would be using it more the next turn, which I should always just toss it, honestly, at this point, because 100% of the time Ken will get a accuracy, and then I just won't ever use it again. So I've been just starting to do that, like, oh, I'll just toss it, because otherwise you're just going to accuracy and I'll get no shot. But if that shot, I could have killed you again, because I needed 1 damage to go through. They're red dice, so they probably wouldn't have been hits, but the chance was still there. That lead one's gone. Now it's just this guy. And this guy, look how far out of combat he is. He's just not even in this game. He's just off to the side playing his own game. But if you look at where he started, he would have been right here, and he would have been able to shoot the Star Destroyer, or he would have been able to shoot into the Quasar right away, or he would have been able to flak and try to kill something. I believe between this turn and this turn, this is the turn people had questions on what Ken was thinking. Because instead of just going with the Star Destroyer, Ken went with the Gazanti to pass it a token. And I can see what Ken was thinking, because he knew that I couldn't kill him outright with either of my ships, and he wanted to shoot at both my ships. And if he was able to shoot at both my ships, I'm pretty sure he would have just killed both those ships right then and there. But he had a nav planned so that he didn't run straight off the table, because he didn't realize I was going to be sitting right in front of him acting as a bumper car. I would have just, because he was going to shoot, and if he killed and he just cruised, he probably would have cruised right off the table, and then he would have lost. So he didn't want to do that, so he had a nav planned. Because he had a nav planned, he needed to have a confire to really do what he wanted, so he just took the risk of tossing a nav. I mean, honestly, he was just playing the betting game of I wouldn't be able to roll a crit, which is usually a good bet, honestly. And I still barely was able to get it. But I was able to strip that token off of him so he couldn't use gunner team, so then he only could make 1 shot. So now we're here. This ship is over here, not playing the same game. this ship is pretty much still sitting at speed 0 because of the arc line. Like, I don't care if you're shooting me with 2 dice. You're not going to be able to kill me with 2 dice. Even if you concentrate on firing 3 dice, you're probably not going to kill me. I'll just eat the damage so I gain points. Quasar doing its things, but it's taking a lot of damage. And then Star Destroyer's gone down. It got a free attack because I left it on 1 stinking health. And the fighters are going to eat me. All my fighters are dead. There's nothing that's stopping it. They're just going to chomp, 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 chomp. And this is how the game ends. I actually finally remembered to take a shot at the end. This is where we called it, and we just calculated points. Quasar managed to stay on the table. His fighters are out of position to try to jump into me. They don't have enough damage or activations to kill me. His ship down here is just sitting pretty, and his Quasar is almost dead. And as you can see where this is, if this hard cell just came through this line and followed those Munificent Conga line, he would have been able to then, on this turn and such, shoot him. And I would have had Concentrate Fire, and he had no defense tokens left, so it would have just straight damage. And I needed like 3 hits on, at that point it would have been 4 dice, 3 hits. It would have died, or if it didn't, I would have just rammed into it. Because he spent this turn trying to kill my Munificent with his fighters, so he didn't have enough damage to kill both those ships. So if I had it pointed the other way, I could have cruised and I could have killed the Star Destroyer, and I could have killed the Quasar. And that's not even like relying on good dice, that's just relying on dice becoming just straight average. It would have easily done it. So looking at that, let's jump into the damage and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is end of turn 2. All of my vultures are gone. Vultures are really good at alpha striking, and they would have been a good punch to be able to use. Got no use out of them. Do you know what I needed? Tri-fighters, because Tri-fighters would have been able to do a counter. And even if I got 1 damage on all of those Tri-fighters, that's still 1 damage. And if you look, when we get to what Ken's fighters end at, I had some of his fighters right at the brink of dying. All I needed on some of them was 1 hit. If I were to have Tri-fighters and use counter on these attacks, he attacked me 4 or 5 times to kill off these vultures. That would theoretically be 5 more damage on his fighters. And then I would be able to use vultures and hopefully hit and swarm and reroll all of the terrible dice that I rolled. So then if we jump to the next round, look how many of my fighters are dead. General Grievous died. These guys are brought back. That's why they're so few health. This guy is already taking damage. This guy's dead, and all the vultures are dead. So I got like no use out of any of my fighters. Here's 106 points. And I just don't counter. I didn't hit any counters. The screens really didn't do anything against Ken attacking me. They worked slightly when I attacked him and avoided countering back. And then all my vultures died out. They just sat there and gave Ken points. I would have preferred having Tri-fighters, because the Tri-aces meant if you sat there for the turns that you sat there, every time you activated, you were going to take a hull damage on an ace, which, like I said, we'll get to Ken and show damage for that and how that would have helped. So this is end of turn 4. I've lost one of my Munificents, but I still have a decent amount of shields and hull on this guy. And if we jump 2 over, you can look, now I have no shields at the end of turn 5 and 2 hull. But that's because that Star Destroyer got a completely free attack off on me when it should have been dead. And if I were to have had the ship kill it before, then I would have entered that turn pretty much like this against a Quasar. And I should be able to overpower a Quasar, especially when it has no defense tokens, and with the other hard cell to come in. So let's jump over to Ken's fighters. I'm just going to jump to the end. Actually, let's jump to end of turn 4. Look at this. This Star Destroyer has no shields and 1 hull. So that means that the salvo that I chose not to spend could have killed it. Or The hard sell, if it came through and was pointing the right direction, because I keep making this mistake, and I'm not going to be making this mistake anymore, pointing a hard sell away from the combat when I'm going to just it in. It could have died, and then I could have not taken a salvo shot with all of its defense tokens gone. So giving it the Dominator title on top of it, because that's really what killed me. Hey, I would have been doing a lot better. And then I wouldn't also have taken the ram damage he took into me. Like, I would have had way more health to deal with a Quasar now that has no shields and already taking hull damage. And if you then jump to the very, very end, here we go. Quasar ended with 3 health. I could have killed that with a hard sell. 100% I could have killed that with a hard sell. I could have just rammed it with a hard sell. That would be 1. And then I needed 2 other damage. And he has a redirect. The brace is gone. There's nothing he can do. It has this giant front arc, and all I needed to do is get 2 dice into it, and I would have gotten 4, because it would be a blue, 2 reds, and then concentrate fire in a blue to kill it. And then it's a table, and then I don't have to worry about the fighters. But if you look at the fighters, look at this. Marek has 4, which that was just the 1 attack against it as my fighters slowly died. Howl Runner had 1 health left, meaning that Pelp, if you landed near him, guess what? You're losing a health. I would have had him out in the front, and then I could have also sniped with this. The TIE Phantom ended with 1. Again, Pelp would have said, hey, here, take 1 free damage. So, like, 2 squadrons are at 1 health and needed to die. If I had Tri-Fighters, I think I would have been able to do that. And if I had the hard sell pointed the right way, I could probably have done that as well. So now let's look at the points, because this is probably as close of a game as you can get after all that. So here we go. I lost my entire fighters and my 2 munificents, so Ken killed 302 points. I killed the Sign Moon in 3 TIE Interceptors for 208. Ken had 90 points of victory tokens. I had 180. The final score was 392 to 388. 6-4. Margin of victory, 4 points. So if we go to this, TIE Phantom wins me the game. Howl Runner wins me the game. Any of these fighters win me the game if I got that much damage on them. So it was really, really close. It was a really, really good game. I made a lot of mistakes, but like, if I brought honestly, I think the Tri-Fighters bringing it in, but I kind of want to have fun with other fighters. Sadly, I'm feeling like, you can tell me what you think in the comments. I'm probably going to be jumping to the comments. If you have a question, go ahead and start typing it in. Like, the problem is I like keep playing the CIS, and I keep coming into the problem of, I just pretty much want to always just bring Tri-Fighters, because the rest of the fighters don't perform well enough for me. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone else really use the B-22s. If you do, let me know. Grievous is very, very rarely used. But again, he is either better after a whole wave of alpha striking going in to hit the squadron because his crits then count, or he's better against just generics. And I got locked down by aces. There's nothing I could really attack that he could use his ability on. And then vultures, again, they have to be alpha strike. This was not meant to be a bomberless, so I don't have hyenas. So, like, honestly, I always just come back to, for 100 points, I can have 6 tri-interceptors. I'm blurring a rebel and the not the rebel, the Imperial and the CIS fighters together. I could have 6 tri-fighters and both their aces for 102 points, and I don't know if I can make a better fighter wing consistently to do what it needs to do for the CIS at that level. Like, I can just leave it there and it'll just do its thing. And, like, honestly, I could leave it there and I can put TI on one of my ships with the point difference, and then I get more counter, and then they die, and then I bring them back with the reserve. Like, there's another option that you can do. So that's my thoughts on the game. Congrats to Ken again for winning it. And and that's like the breakdown of what I would do to have changed the game after looking at it. Like, honestly, it comes down to should have brought tri-fighters, and that hard sell was pointed the wrong direction. If it flew in, it would have been able to do more. And that's just stuff that you don't see until the end of the game, which is why I do this. So those are some of the lessons that I learned. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this game, and hopefully learned with me. Like I said at the beginning, like, winning's fun, but you don't learn as much with it. Like, being the list tinkerer that I am, I like being able to know what works and what doesn't work. And winning doesn't actually really help you with that. Like, so my fleet worked okay, and I won, so do I continue playing it? Move on, I've done that. But does it really work? And, like, so this fleet, as much as it's, like, I think not a good fleet, it didn't work. I lost. So now I have to go back and tinker with it. So eventually when I use Kraken again, I'm probably going to go back to this basic fleet and be like, can I change things or build it with different ships to try to get off the same gimmick? I got the gimmick off a couple times, which was good when I stripped those like on fire tokens out. But there's other things I can do to try to improve this list. And then gameplay. I just made some mistakes, and okay, OBS decided to disconnect itself there, so hopefully I'm still with you guys. I'm gonna be watching the live feed for a second. Let's see, that was right at the hour point. Interesting. OBS. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, that was weird. It's never done that before. I've talked a lot before, but that, like, disconnected right at an hour. It's been wanting me to update, but I haven't had time to do it, so I'll probably go back and do it soon. Okay, what was I mumbling about? Oh yeah, you learned some things. And that's actually one of the things when I first started really, really playing. I went to, I think I've talked to you about it, Fair Games, and I played with some really, really good Armada players. And what that made me do is, really, I brought any list and I lost. So then I just started working on fundamentals of each type of list, so that each archetype of list building I could be decent at, and then I could just throw random things in it, because building is like, if I'm going to lose bringing optimal cards or lose bringing not optimal cards, but then change the game, it's actually better for me to be a player that can try to win with not optimal cards a lot of times, and pull off a gimmick against competitive players, because then it throws them for a loop because they're not knowing what you're going to do. So that's kind of like my thought process with that. And then losing, like, I can clearly see where I'm making mistakes and then try to fix them. Okay, so let's go to the comments. I see some filtering in, and go ahead and keep filtering them in. I try to answer them as best as I can. Okay, Followed says, I think SEP fighters really need a second expansion. Personally, I tend to bring no fighters in my SEP list, which is dumb, but I'm willing to take the risks sometimes. Yeah, I agree. I think both the Republic and the CIS could really use another fighter, but, like, if you really look at it, like, so the Imperial and Rebels have 4 fighters from Fighter 1, 4 more fighters from Fighter 2, so they're at 8 fighters. Plus they have the Rogue and Villain, which is 4 more fighters, just fighter types. They're not even talking about aces. We're just talking generics. So they're at 12. And then the Empire have the Gauntlet. So the Empire have 13 fighters. The Rebels have 12. And the CIS and GAR have 4. So they're way limited in options, which is what you're seeing. Because there are squadrons that are just straight mainly duds. or you just don't need to bring a lot of them. I'm looking at you, Lambda. Like, unless you're playing in Germany, you're only bringing like one, one Lambda, and his name is Colonel Jendon. You very rarely see just a normal Lambda. And then like a lot of the rogue and villains, like on the Rebel side, you don't see that much of. You see a lot of like Lando and the Millennium Falcon, but like a lot of the other ones you don't see a bunch of. But the Gar have 4, so that's why I'm like Tri-Fighters, that's it. And then like for the Gar, I really like Y-Wings, but there are other fighters and they just don't work as well, or they're really slow, and I don't want to play that because I can't react as well. But yeah, they could really use another fighter pack, and just to liven and give it a little bit more list build variety. But yes, I either build like straight up Tri-Fighters, or I bring none. And for this one, I wanted to bring a fighter screen, because if I'm sitting back like that, I just get eaten by fighters. As you saw, they just annihilate me. So I wanted to make it into a screen. I should have just gone with Tri-Fighters, but it is what it is. Okay, then Mark says, what is your favorite list to build? And Mark, what list do Ken like to build? Ken likes to build MC30 Rebel lists. I hate playing them. He also enjoys, as much as the next host, Imperial Star Destroyer lists. He really likes the Architens, so a lot of times you'll see like Star Destroyers paired with Architens. 1, maybe 2. He played the list last season that he was playing as I believe Tarkin, and it was like 3 Architens, a Gazanti, and a Star Destroyer. So that's the type of list Ken builds. I personally like building fighter lists, or really, really jank. Like, one of the benefits and the downsides of playing on the channel is that I'm a list builder, so I make a lot of the lists, and I don't really play Onager, so I actually do have a bunch of Onager lists that I've just kept in my head. They're not fun to play against, so I'm not going to make Ken suffer through that on the channel. But if I were to go to a tournament, I'm not going to bring something subpar. There are some competitive Onager lists that I just have stored in my head that one day some poor soul will have to face against, unless they like really nerf it. But I like building fighter lists probably the best, and I like building fighter lists that have some sort of gimmick in it. So like I've flown before Rebel Y-Wing. Like you can go see, this is what I brought to the LVO the last time the LVO took place. I brought like a Y-Wing Ruthless Strategist thing, and I can wipe out like entire squadron balls and like that with flak. So it's like flak, Ruthless into a Y-Wing, Ordnance Pod, Ruthless into a Y-Wing. So I'm doing probably 4 damage to any squadron at 1 damage at a time, which you're dead. It kills off pretty much everything, and then I can shoot with the Y-Wings. Yeah, that's 1 more damage. Go ahead, use your tokens. Do you want to scatter 1? No. Do you take it? You have to scatter, or you die. And then I just auto damage you with Ruthless. It's horrible to play against. And then I've done the same thing with Imperial. I brought it to Gen Con. I brought this. It was before 2-ship was really invented. 2-ship was starting to be played with, but it hadn't been fully fleshed out yet. I brought a Ruthless Thrawn bomber list, and the idea was that I would use the bombers and Ruthless to flak off all your squadrons. It was when Riken Aces were big, and I've played it once in testing against a really, really, really good player, Jack, and he brought Riken Aces, and I killed off every single one of his aces in 1.5 turns. So it was the first turn, he played fighter ambush, moved his fighters toward me, and then I just flacked them all out of existence on the first activation of my next turn. So like some of those like anti-fighter fighter builds are a lot of fun, but if you run against someone with no fighters, then you have so much stuff dedicated into fighters that you can't do it. As you can see, I like playing Plo Y-Wing bombers, and I haven't come up with specifically CIS fighter lists that I really like. I mainly build CIS fighter lists or with tri-fighters. That's really it. But I wouldn't really call it like a dedicated fighter list per se like the other ones. Like I'm not relying on the fighters to kill ships. So hopefully that answers your questions of what type of thing you would do. Yeah, so those that are asking, OBS is the software that I use to stream. It's free. You can check it out. You put inputs and mics into it, and then it streams it to whatever service, Twitch or YouTube, that you're using. And for some reason, right when I hit an hour mark, it decided to disconnect, then reconnect. And I'm glad it reconnected because that would have stunk. Message retracted. I think I saw it earlier, so I'm going to answer it anyway. So what is your thoughts on the other Munificent? And it's an points increase. I don't really use it that much because I think Munificent's strength is the fact that you can just slap LTT at it and be done and walk away from it. But you could use, I believe, defensive retrofit on the other one. It costs more. It has better flak, which is good. I think it's a blue or a black dice flak versus just a red. So it has red range and blue range. Let me see. It's the Star Frigate. It's red and a black, so it's better at flacking, which I'm fine with. And it does have that defensive retrofit slot, which is also good. The reason why I don't take the defensive retrofit slot on the Munificent is a lot of times having ECM on it doesn't really matter. It is going to die quickly regardless. Like, ECM is really the only one I would consider. Its weird arcs mean that using like early warning system doesn't make sense because they're going to be able to shoot you pretty much on any hull zone that they want out, whatever they want, because your hull zones are weird. And then I've tried it with reinforced blast doors, but have never been able to use it because they just straight up die. Like, they get all their shields depleted and then they're dead. So I haven't found a use necessarily for the defensive retrofit slot. It is something that I've thought about. I just haven't really used. Okay, so Patrick, could you have fortressed your squads pre-alpha near your hard cell? Whether Ken's alpha, since he doesn't have many good anti-squad ships, and then hopped your squads in as a counter alpha? Yes, I could have done that. I thought I was going to be just out of range for the full alpha, but he just clipped my line. My idea was to set up so that maybe only his speed 5 things, so his speed 5 things could get to me and not his other things. Like, Hull Runner was this close to, hold on, let me pull it up. Hull Runner was very close to not being engaged with anything of mine. Let me flip it over and show you. Okay, so if you look at this here, I believe, let's zoom in. Oh no, she got, see, this is Hull Runner here. So this is speed 4. So she got in there just enough to be able to pass her bubble around. But like, most of my fighters are just outside of distance 1. If I did line up a little bit farther back, it might have worked. Yeah, I could have done that. That's another option. I didn't really even think about really just holding them completely back, because I've done that before. I think I did that in the last game when I used tri-fighters, and they all missed against ships. So yeah, I could have done that. Yeah, that's a good option. Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely consider that. Okay, so Josh starts talking about, it looks like other fighters, Naboo, N1, V-Wing, at a 2, Lat would bring us up to what X-Wing has. Yes, all those fighters seem really good. I would imagine that the V-Wing, the ETA 2 for sure, because more Jedis, and then honestly, like, Jedis is what really sells the GAR squadrons. Like, I would really like, Anakin in a fighter, not just a Y-Wing. Then you could have Obi-Wan, which I really want Obi-Wan as a fighter, because that would be awesome. I don't know if I would say we would get Naboo and 1s, because like when you look at the stat line, it's hard to say exactly what the stat line would be like compared to like a torrent or a V-wing. Like it would be like really overlapping with the Naboo fighter of what it would be, or it would just be trash. So like that's hard. Maybe a Z95, but that would be trash too. I don't know which one I would want, because we actually see Z95s, or those of you that aren't in the United States, Z95s. We see them in the Clone Wars used a lot, but for the most part, we just see Naboo starfighters once. But it would be really cool to paint. We would have to find a really cool paint. That would be a fun project to paint. I like theme slicks because I'm nuts. That's Ken. Sorry. Yeah, Ken also likes themeless. So if you look, he'll make like the Adelon Defense Fleet, or specifically fleets that he's like, I put this turbo laser on it because that's what the turbo laser has on it. I don't do that. Like when actually it's kind of funny when we were playing for the first time with it's the really long name, and it makes your salvo just be able to set a dice. It's like 821 something heavy turbo laser, something like that. I'm like who comes up with these crazy names? And he's like, well, that's the type of turbo laser that is actually on the Venators. And I'm like, nerd. I know a lot about Star Wars. I don't know what what the name brand of the turbo lasers is, but Ken does. He's funny. Okay, and then Josh again. I'm going to play a Rebellion in the Rim campaign as Imperials. Was going to do an ISD in one list, thinking ISD 1 with fighters and a Victory plus Gladiator in the other list. That could work. If you've watched our Rebellion in the Rim, I highly recommend checking out my list. In the Return to the Rim, because I use an ISD in that, and because of the points required for ISDs, you really need to plan out your list. So just take that into consideration. I think we were talking about it on our Discord earlier this week. Someone was asking about it, like, do you go fighter heavy early, do you go fighter heavy late? And if that's something you're interested in, join our Discord. And there's a lot of people there that play a lot of Rebellion in the Rim. We actually have a lot of Rebellion in the Rim players that play there and discuss, like, mainly we a lot of times talk about how we would adjust the rules of it, or rule discussion, because sometimes things aren't very clear. But building lists, I always will build a list at 250 and then back it off to one upgrade, and then count how many battles I would have to win to get it up to that standard. And if I can't do it quickly, then I rework the entire list. That's actually one of the problems with having Star Destroyers in lists in the Rebellion in the Rim, is because ISDs like to be Christmas trees, and they like to have lots of upgrades, and you can't do that immediately. So you might be suffering until you can get up to the potential to that point. The Rebels, on the other hand, a lot of their ships run almost naked or with one upgrade. So if you go back to our original Rebellion in the Rim, when you look at my CR90 list, they start with the turbo lasers, and I never have to put another thing on them because those ships are now done, and the rest of it can be used to develop other parts of the fleet. So take that into consideration when you're building a fleet, is how many upgrades you need in the end. Because if you decide to fill like every slot in an ISD, and let's say an ISD has 6 slots, that means you start with 1 slot filled. So that means you have to play 5 rounds of it to finish just the ISD, and that's not adding anything else into the other stuff. So, food for thought. William Anderson, how many times have you lost to John? I mean, Ken. A lot. How many times have you won? So I have actually a really good record against Ken. I think most times when I bring an SSD, I lose. So 2, 3, a couple times in... if I don't include March Madness, because that's like a really weird entity. Outside, before Ken and I started the channel, I lost to him once, and this was before like a lot of the nerfs to flotillas, and I was playing this really weird Imperialist that was like double Gladiator and a whole bunch of Gazantes lifeboating, I believe Sloan, and I had the Lambda shuttles in there, and this is when the Lambda shuttles were infinite range, which was hilarious. So the idea was like the gladiators could swoop around the back, or it might have been victories. I don't remember. All I know is this list. I'm like, this is going to be a competitive list, and then Ken trounced me and tabled me. I'm like, well, the tournament's in a week. I guess I'm changing my list to something else. And I think Ken just looked at me. He's like, you've beaten me like every single time, and I just tabled you. This isn't what you should be bringing. So I think that is the only time outside of the channel that I've lost to him, and then what you've seen on the channel. But honestly, like, you can actually go watch most of the games Ken and I have played. At the beginning, Ken and I used to always play at our local store, Greenfire, which no longer exists, but I think their YouTube channel's still up, and you can find very young Ken and me playing, not really knowing what we're doing, making tons of rule mistakes, but having fun online. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to do it ourselves, not associated with a game store, because now we control it. Because some days we would come in, they're like, hey, do you want to stream? We're like, sure. And then some days they didn't want to stream, so then we didn't. But those games honestly turned into some of the best games. Yep, Ken knows what that turbo laser is. And then Joshua again, watching the first one right now, and very disappointed in you for putting all of your fighters in the non-Terran current list. Yeah, all my fighters. They're like, honestly, some of those lists are really mean. But I'll let you watch and figure out that all by yourself. Okay, so we've been going on now for about an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to give you your early sneak peek of what's coming up this next week. I don't actually remember what we're releasing. It's going to be a fun one, I bet. We're almost done with this season. This season's gone by really, really fast. Okay, so this next one is going to be Ken playing Admiral Piet, and myself playing Sato. So on our Discord, we've had lots of discussions about Sato in the past, and I believe, was it last season? I believe it was. I tried Blue Dice Sato. And this episode, I'm going to be trying a different iteration of Sato to see which one I like better. And again, this is a really weird build, and in a vacuum, it works. I don't know if I played it consistently, if it would, do anything consistent. But I like the build. Ken's playing Piet, I think, for the first time. So it's going to be a good match. There's some more comments. Let me look. William, what would you say has been Ken's biggest improvement in his game? As you can see in this, it's squadrons. Before, Ken didn't really like playing squadrons. He still doesn't really like playing squadrons, and I'm a squadron player. So if I can get an alpha strike on Ken, even with a not a good squadron build, I can usually wipe out a lot of Ken's fighters or tie them up and make them non-existent. But as you saw in this, Ken actually knows how to play fighters. That's how Ken has improved. Like, straight up. Ken has way improved his fighter game, which makes you a way better Armada player in general. Okay, so tune in this week, and we're going to be having episode 8, and it's going to be a fun one. Hopefully you guys all have a great rest of the night. Thanks for tuning in. This one's run a little bit later. It just works better with my schedule. And a big shout out to Rovechkin for making the list that beat me. Ugh. Now you're technically 2-0 in the channel, so congrats on that. I won with your one list, and then Ken's won with your list as well, so good job. Okay, so until next time, I'm John. This is the Backseat Admiral, and you have been watching Ion Radio.